We are live. Hello, my name is Bryce Tubbs. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. With me today is Kiran Bedi. She is an author, creator, and meditation practitioner who helps you stop overthinking and opens you up to your innate creativity. I cannot wait to help her talk about exactly how she does it and have you guys get some tremendous value out of this today. Is there anything else you'd like me to add to this introduction, Kiran?
That was great, and thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Excellent. If you're watching, I recommend that you grab a sheet of paper. We were talking yesterday, and I took 4 pages of notes just from a brief conversation with her, okay? So there's tremendous wisdom that she has, and I cannot wait for you guys to hear it. So, the first question, what got you into meditation?
I actually hit a rock bottom in my life, and at that time it was so dramatic for me. And worst thing, I didn't know it was literally a nervous breakdown, and I just said to myself, like, if this is what it's supposed to be, then I think I've pretty much seen all of my life, and I am done living. And I know it sounds so like far-fetched now that I think about it, and so silly in some ways, but at that time it was quite my reality. And yeah, I was just so sad and just so like feeling so hopeless and and just like given up on life and hope in many ways. And I remember one day I was just crying and crying and crying, and I don't know how many hours I must have cried. And I remember, like, when you reach this bottomless pit and you just keep falling and falling and falling, it was kind of like that. And I had an out of body experience on that night. I literally felt like this very feminine white energy around me and just like engulfing me. And I remember crying even more. And about 2, 3 days after that incident, I just happened to be at Barnes and Nobles in New York City and on Lincoln Center, and I came across this book on meditation, and that was it. And I remember listening to it, and then I got into my full-on researcher mode, finding everything to do with meditation. And yeah, the more I started doing it, and reading about it, the more I was like, oh my God, like this is it. Maybe there is hope after all. And then I just got so interested in it, and it was really a way to keep my mind uplifted and really save me from that hopelessness that had engulfed me. So that's how I started in meditation. So it was more like an SOS situation where, I had to find a way to keep myself afloat. And I often joke about that. I didn't find meditation, but meditation found me because it really felt like so. And then very shortly, I joined a meditation school, and then I've been meditating ever since.
So yesterday we were talking about, some of the instruments that I have around me. Like I just have multiple, I wonder if it's going to pull over, multiple guitars, just different things like that. And you were talking about instruments being used for meditation, specifically a piano. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
That's true. One of my meditation teachers would often talk about developing focus. And I remember in one of the lectures he gave was that how our left and the right brain are not working simultaneously. It's like one part of the brain is developed to a more degree than the other one. So that was very true for me because I was very much into science and maths and those kind of subjects in school. And even when I went to university, I majored in science. So for me, there was no room for art. In fact, for the longest time, I used to think that was like a complete waste of time. And but when I learned about how you have this left and right brain, and how in order to focus, which for me was extremely important, given my background, how I got started in meditation, and how I really wanted to improve in meditation. So for me, nothing was off limits, and I was willing to give everything a shot just to have a calm, focused mind. Because literally, like my survival at that time depended on it. So I remember, when I came across this teaching on, how playing piano, it actually stimulates both sides of the brain, and they actually start talking to one another, because right now the brain is divided by corpus callosum, I think. And it's like, when you're doing math, when you're coding, when you're an engineer, when you're doing brain science, anything technical, you are constantly giving a workout to the left side of your brain. But the right side of your brain, which is responsible for emotions, responsible for creativity, responsible for intuition, and all the things we deem as creative, is not getting a workout. It's kind of like if you have a muscle, you keep working out one end of the muscle, but the other side, not so much. And then you say, I'm not a creative. No, you are a creative. In fact, all of us are creatives. It's just that we haven't tapped into, or we haven't given enough workout to that side of the muscle that is responsible for creativity. So going back to your question on on a musical instrument used for piano, used for meditation. So when I was so like jazzed when I came across this information on, how piano could be an asset, I was like, I'm game on. So I quickly signed up for basic piano lessons, because I was like, I have no desire to be a musician, but I absolutely have desire to have my left and the right brain working together, in harmony, in unison. And so I signed up for it, and I kid you not, Bryce, first 6 months were terrible. I hated every moment, because it's like learning a new language and you sound so darn awful, because I was like, I can't get anything to sound right. And it wasn't like math where I could just cram up a couple of keys and then know how to play a song. It doesn't work like that. So that was quite humbling.
Uh,
And um, and then eventually, I got to a point where I was at least able to learn the basics. And then I had so much respect and admiration for what music does to your soul, to your heart, to your mind, to your brain, and also to your meditation. Because what I experienced from my own learnings was that when I am totally focused, because it's like all your senses are getting tapped into except for taste. Like you're looking at the keys with your eyes, you're looking at what you're playing, your ears are at work, your hands are at work, your feet are at work, and then there is so much going on in your head that you can't afford to think about, oh, what someone said to you,
yeah.
or what you have to do. You're so focused. And I think that was that magical state that my teacher always used to talk about. And that was the magical state that I wanted to experience. And it doesn't last for, forever, maybe a few seconds here, a few seconds there, but that is like divine jazz.
Uh,
So, so in that regard, meditation, playing instrument really helped me hone my meditation by giving me a taste of what it is to be present, by giving me a taste of what it is to not have an overthinking mind,
mm,
because I really had one.
uh, so let's ask about this, right? So now, since you're so left brain heavy when you're first, well, that looks like the right, but now reverse, yeah. But
Yeah,
so now you do a lot of art, you have a lot of hobbies. Is that, are you are you going the opposite direction, developing your right brain even more than what?
absolutely. Absolutely. For a very left brainer, and it was quite a humbling experience for me, because I was, maybe people are left brain, but I feel in looking back, maybe I was to the extremes,
Uh,
where I used to think hobby was a complete waste of time. Like, who has time for hobbies? Like, I literally used to look down upon that. Am I, am I proud of that? Absolutely no. Because what happened was that when I had done 4 or 5 years of meditation, I then came to a point where I absolutely had to address my emotions. And that was a really huge part of my healing. What that meant was like really developing emotional resilience. And as I started to work with my emotional body, so think of your body, what you see is a physical body, right?
yeah.
Now, think you also have, um, so how do I explain this? I wish I could have something.
Well,
Like think of those Russian dolls, a
mm,
doll within a doll within a doll. Okay. So that's a good visual. So think of like your physical body. Then another layer around that physical body is your emotional body, and then your mental body, and then your spiritual body. So think of it as a different set of body. Does that visual help?
Yeah.
Okay. So a lot of times, we see the physical body, it's right there in front of eyes. We know when it's hurting, when it's not hurting. End of the story, we address it. When it comes to the mental body, again, if you are way too mental, way too overthinking, you kind of know it because you just know it. But when it comes to emotional body, A, we are not taught the importance of emotions. B, we are not even, um, unless you have parents who are very mindful and are very emotionally intelligent and model those behaviors in front of you, majority of us have absolutely no idea what the heck does emotions even mean, and that there is also something called an emotional body. And a lot of us don't even want to go there because, by the very virtue of being the emotional body, it's one of the most challenging bodies to work on and with. So when I started kind of unraveling this emotional body, it was one of it was the hardest I have ever worked in my life. It was it was a lot of hard work. I literally had to learn to mother myself, to sit with myself through those emotions and then feelings of not feeling good enough, or feeling as I was. You just carry so much of this anger and shame and guilt. I'm not saying all of us, but some of us, because a lot of times, it's like I grew up with the belief that anger was not a good emotion. So go figure that one. So
Yeah.
anytime anger comes up, you're like, oh no, I'm not supposed to feel it. And then what happens is you just keep piling on and adding on. And then before you know it, you have this heap of anger that you have absolutely no idea what to do with it. And so for me, God bless my journaling and my journals, because I started unraveling all of those. I was like, okay, why am I angry? Why do I feel guilt about this situation? Why do I feel shame about the situation? Because I was willing to dig deep because I really wanted to soothe myself. Like literally, when you help yourself, you are willing to go into that places where otherwise you might not have.
Yeah.
Maybe if I didn't have the meditation practice, maybe I wouldn't be at that point where I wanted to know my emotions. I was like, why do I go haywire? Why does, when my friend say something so silly, I just blast?
Mm.
Why don't I speak up my truth? Why am I so afraid that so and so friend will leave me? So what? And these are the questions I had not personally taken time to address. And what once you start addressing, you start to become very emotionally clear, and you get to a point where you are like, oh, I understand what boundaries are. And then I like when people say, oh, someone walks all over me, because at some level you have given permission, and I can so relate because I was one of them.
Uh,
And then learning that it's okay for people to leave, and for you to leave someone's life. It's absolutely okay. But I hadn't done all this work. So to work with my emotional body was one of the most challenging things I did. And now that I've jumped at so many places, I totally forgot the question you asked.
well, I guess that catapults into our next question, or our next two questions, right? So you said something interesting yesterday when you were saying, go after a problem or a negative emotion, right? When we're talking about like clearing out our energy. So if you go after it in one area, you're going to go after it in a couple different places, right? Can you explain on that?
So what I was saying yesterday was that, let's say you feel shame, okay, in your personal life, in let's say your personal life. Chances are, when you have an emotion that's heightened, okay, you will notice that that emotion not just occurs in one area of your life, which is, let's say, personal life, but it will also show up with your friends. It will also show up with your work colleagues. It will show up in your work. It will show up in your career, in maybe 10 other things and 10 other people if you pay attention. But what happens is when you start to address the emotion, by the way, if you need to address the emotion, you first have to acknowledge it and accept it that yes, this is the emotion. And I think this is one of the things that's really missing in our culture today, where we don't know, or majority of us don't know the difference between anger and rage,
Mm.
frustration and annoyance, shame and guilt. Like this emotion bubbles up and comes up, and and it's uncomfortable, so we want to run away from it. But when you run away from it, you'll never get to hear what emotion that is. Is it annoyance? Is it anger? Is it shame? Is it guilt? Like, what is it? It's like someone knocking on your door. Unless you open the door, you will never know who is knocking on it. Un- Unless, until, you get to a point where, like, you have a horde of people standing in front of the door, and then you have no choice but to open the door.
Ah,
I feel that's pretty much how it went for me. I had so much stuff going on. I was like, okay, we just need to open the door.
yeah.
So going back to, once you are humble enough to be and curious enough, actually, I think curiosity would be the best virtue that we could draw upon. That when you're just curious enough to check out, okay, what's showing up, what's knocking on my door every day, what emotions come to pay visit to me every single day, and when they show up, can I be with them like I would entertain a stranger over a cup of tea or coffee? And just ask them, like, hey, what do you want to tell me? What is it that I haven't paid attention to? And can you just have a conversation with them, like just you and I are having? And once you do that, blessed be your soul, because then you can move to the next step, which is when you see that the emotion is very heightened in one area of your life, which is, say, your personal life, and you start taking actions, because you can't get to a solution if you understand the problem.
Mm.
So, unless you get to the clarity that, okay, we are experiencing shame in this personal life, and this is how it manifests, unless you see that, you'll not get to the next part of the equation, which is what do we do about it?
So, you know, that actually leads into something interesting, right? So oftentimes what you'll see when you're trying to either clear these emotions, like for example, let's say fear, right? You'll see all these quotes on social media, which like fear is like false evidence appearing real and all these different things. But for some people, that's not always the most helpful, right?
Exactly. It definitely wasn't helpful for me at all. In fact, it made me feel even more small. Like I felt as if I wasn't good enough. For me, those kind of quotes, as true as they are, would trigger like I was less than, or I was never enough, or everyone knew a secret code and somehow I was blinded to that code. Because here's the thing, all of us have very different experiences in life. And you never know what aches someone and to what degree.
Uh,
Maybe a quote like that, which is, fear is false appearance. False, what was that quote again?
false evidence.
Evidence
Yeah.
appearing real. So maybe for someone that has a little bit of fear, maybe that is all they need, and then they boom, they move to the next. But maybe for someone like me, like I was sharing with you, and this is something, again, I would have never known if it wasn't for my meditation practice. And the degree and the depth to which I was holding fear in my body.
Mm.
And so for me, I have a very different perception of how to clear fear. Because for someone like me, as intellectual as I was, and as many quotes I could get my hand on, they never helped me.
Mm.
They really never did until I addressed my emotions. So, it's like to each its own. Is there a one solution fit all? Maybe not. So that is why, when you develop self awareness, when you start to know yourself intimately, when you start to pay attention to your emotions, to your feelings, that will tell you what is it that you need to work on.
Yeah. So can you talk about like when we're working on these emotions, right? And trying to change different things in your life, right? Talk about surrendering to a bigger plan. What does that mean and how can you utilize that?
You know, so so when you're working through an emotion, so let's say fear as an example. I don't know if fear is an emotion. I think it is. Um, when you're working through it, a lot of times it will mean, at least, and again, I speak from my experience, so please only take what resonates, discard the rest, because not everything is for everyone. So always check in with yourself. Is this what this person is sharing for me or not? And just take it from there. So going back to the experience, Bryce, I was sharing with you, as I was working through fears, I needed to take certain steps. And those steps I was actually even more afraid to take. Like, because I was so intellectual and I could see, oh, if I took this step, it's going to lead me here. If I took step B, it's going to lead me here, and on and on and on. And I think I was so stuck intellectually that I just could not jump off a cliff and trust that the universe would hold me, if that makes any sense.
Mhm.
You know, because a lot of times as you're working through your fears, there might come a time where you just have to, you've cleared all the things emotionally, all the emotional garbage, all the emotional feelings that have come up for you, you've made peace with them, and then it comes a point when you just have to act. And that action is sometimes an act of surrender. You know, for example, when I started making videos, I and I had a lot of fear making videos. I literally drove myself to not just intellectual exhaustion, but also emotional exhaustion until I got to a point where I was like, okay, you know what? Even if no one watches it, I'm going to do it. And I literally came to a do or die situation emotionally and mentally because I knew how important it was, but I also knew how afraid I was. But at the same time, I also took baby steps. So the very first series I did, or like video series I did on LinkedIn, was a meditation series. And you have absolutely no idea how afraid I was in doing the series. And I go through that kind of fear mindset every single time I think of a new series because I wonder like, who am I to do a series? Or anything that your ego tells you that you're not enough.
Mm.
So a part of surrender, at least for me, is trusting that when you show up with an intention to help someone, when you show up with the intention to really make a difference in someone's life, and you surrender into that intention, someone will be there to catch you.
Mm.
Like it won't fall flat. And I think that is also a fear that comes up for a lot of people, like you were sharing with me yesterday, that a client telling you perhaps no one cares about them.
Mm.
I think when you have an intention of the highest degree, and then you just surrender into that, you just lean into that I can see all the avenues that could potentially I could assist from my offering, or that could open up for me through my offering, and then you just let the universe take its course and do its thing. To me, that's an act of surrender. And
Uh,
I think that is something that a lot of people can draw upon at this time. When we are all feeling very edgy, not knowing how our business is going to be. But if we keep taking actions, keep taking steps, we may not know what that end solution or that end result would look like. But if we just trust and lean into that as we show up, as we keep taking action, the universe will do its course because we are surrendering into something higher, more powerful, more bigger than ourselves. I feel we will find a way out of this.
yeah. Let's just do a 1 minute question, right?
Okay?
So in addition to surrendering, right? It wouldn't really be surrendering if you could see the future. So would you want to see the future?
Actually, no. Where is the surprise element? It would be so boring. I know it's one of those like two-edged swords. You want to know the future and yet you don't. But I think there's more fun in not knowing. It just keeps life more interesting.
Yeah. Because I guess you wouldn't have anything to surrender into if you knew exactly what was going to come too, so your character wouldn't be built as strong.
Yes, and also you maybe the universe has something much bigger, brighter, stronger, powerful for you.
Mm.
And maybe all you could think of was this, and what the universe has in plan for you is this. So go figure, right?
Yeah, because you can only see part of the future, right? So then you wouldn't be able to take it into the correct context.
And here's another thing that think about it this way, that what you knew yesterday or the world that looked yesterday is not the same the way the world looks today. So your information, your perception would have been limited to a very small, narrow window. But whereas today, there's so much more you know that you didn't know yesterday.
Mm. Exactly. You know, what does success look like to you, either for your life or for your business, or if you consider them intertwined, together?
It's funny you asked this because I literally did a video on this not too long ago. And as I was contemplating on success, for me, what it has become now is what is it that I did today? What is it that I know today that I didn't know yesterday?
Mm.
Am I more vulnerable today? Am I more open today? What new ideas did I check out in these or in, or work on in these 90 days that I didn't work on in the previous 90 days? So now it's much more like, how much did I step into the unknown? What new opportunities did I say hello to? Did I think outside the box? So for me, and what did you fail at? Because that's another thing that I really struggled a lot with, and that was perfectionism.
Mm.
As an intellect and as a very like heavy science minded individual, like left brainer,
Oh,
I was like perfectionist to the core, and and that really kept me little. And now I know the first few tries are going to suck and suck big time.
yeah.
And then, but there is so much beauty and grace in those first few videos or first few anythings you make. I think for me, when I look back at all the paintings that I ever made, the first few ones hold a special place in my heart because who I was back then and still daring to show up. I think that is more beautiful. Like I would take that imperfect, genuine self over the, yeah, perfect, I got it all together self any day.
Why?
Because that's what makes us human, right?
Mm.
So for me, success is how much did you fail? How much were you willing to fail?
Mm.
And also, this is something I borrowed from Sarah Blakely, who says, how much are you willing to make a complete fool of yourself? And sometimes I have published videos where I was like, all right, I am willing to make a complete fool of myself because I don't know if, those topics are going to resonate with someone or not.
Mm.
And then when my ego is like, no, do you think I can publish it? And I'm like, okay, that's fine. We're just going to go for it. So,
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, it's really interesting. We were talking about this, towards the end of the conversation yesterday, but you and my videos look a little bit different and like have a different intention than other people's videos. Like when I see your video, I'm like, wow, there's a process, there's some thought that's been put into this. We're talking about like intentions of videos and how it comes across when it's actually produced. Can you explain a little bit more about setting your intention for videos to,
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So before I make any videos, when I sit down to write the content, for me, making a difference in someone's life, it is the most number one intention for me. So for me, I always say a prayer. In fact, if you see my template of all my content, the first thing you will find on that template is a prayer.
uh,
That, it is my intention, and you can word it however you want it for your business. But when you put a structure it's like the house has a structure that this is where the drawing room will go, this is where the bedroom will go, the bathroom, the kitchen, and on and on. Think about it in a similar way. When you put a structure that this is the intention, this is the foundation, this is the groundwork from which I want my garden to blossom, that kind of gives you directive on where to move your energy. So then with that intention, I always first say out loud the prayer. Then I sit down. Sometimes I don't get ideas right away. Then I will just close my eyes and sit in meditation. And I was like, okay, what is the greatest message that I can convey in this moment of time that I know of to someone watching this video such that it changes their life? That is the intention with which I show up for my videos. And then I'll get ideas and I'll write, and then I'll sit on them. Do they feel right? Because you write one day, it has a certain tone and connotation to it. You come back the next day, you're like, nah, this doesn't feel right, this feels right, on and on. So you kind of have a feeling, and I always like to break it down into steps, because that's that's just the way my brain works. And I just feel like that stays longer with the viewer. Like if I were to read or learn everything that I am sharing in my videos, I'm a kind of person that would like to break things down in a way that was easy to digest. Mm-hmm. And after that, sometimes when I am doing my videos, I always ask myself, do they make sense to me? Like if I was in the shoes of like my younger self, would my younger self say, okay, I got it, or no? And if it doesn't, then I need to simplify it. And the other thing I do is I always give personal experiences wherever I can. Because again, when we see it in action in someone's life, we can relate it better. So a lot of what I share, it comes from my own life experience and things that I struggled with. And then when I'm like, okay, I see how because I really struggled with a lot of things, to be quite honest, from overthinking to overanalyzing to perfectionism to struggling with a lot of my emotions. And I just have a kind of brain where, Bryce, I was actually, when I had just left my job and I was like, what the heck am I supposed to create in this world? And I remember lying down on my bed one evening and I was like, there should be a emotional resilience roadmap. There should be a roadmap that would say, hey, this is what shame looks like, and this is the path you're going to walk on, and this is what all the feelings are going to show up for you, and you have to do step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you get on the other side. And I was like, why doesn't a roadmap like this exist? Because I struggle with shame a lot. I struggle with guilt a lot. I struggle with anger a lot. And because of the way my brain works, and I'm just very curious individual by nature, and I had all these different interests, and then meditation as my foundation, I literally checked out anything and everything that I felt even could remotely benefit me. So for me, nothing was off limits. And with God's grace, I was in a community of people. I had friends that actually were also very much in sync with what I was working on. Like I had friends that had very high degree of emotional intelligence, that had very high degree of focus and meditation skills. So when I spoke to them, it was literally like meeting of the minds. And I was just like a sponge. And they would say something and I would stay up all night long doing research. Okay, what did this person say? What does this mean? And I love to read. I don't even know how many books I must have read because I just wanted to put a sense to what I was feeling. Like this whole thing about, I made a video on nice person syndrome or a nice girl syndrome. And it's actually quite a real thing, especially when, you're born and raised in Asian culture specifically. Yeah. This whole mindset of being good, like screw being good, be you, right? But at the same time, when you're raised in that with that mindset, where do you go to change? So this is the emotional work that I'm talking about that I really had to delve into. Now I have absolutely no problem being nice because I know I am being me first and foremost, and then I'm being nice.
Mm,
I'm not accommodating someone because I have divorced myself. Oh no, that ain't happening anymore,
mm,
right? Because a lot of times what happens is you don't put yourself on the forefront, and then obviously you don't like someone's guts because you feel like they're doing everything they needed to do and you're nowhere. Of course,
yeah,
anyone would feel like that. That's very human. But you are the one who's not giving yourself permission in the first place. And then the question becomes, why are you not giving permission? Why are you putting this person on a pedestal? Why are you not looking and treating everyone as an equal? And that is another whole story of, where as a society, we are conditioned to look at hierarchy and look at, oh, this person makes so and so, so they have to be put on a pedestal. Oh, no. End of the day, we are all humans.
uh,
And we are all equals, but it really takes a moment of self-awareness to be able to self-source that, okay, this is what's happening, this is what I'm thinking, and I need to change that thinking. Unfortunately, you can't swim in someone's head and be like, Kiran, what the heck are you thinking? Self-correct. That thing only you can do for yourself.
mm.
And therein lies, the blessing, and maybe a not so great blessing of meditation. The blessing is that you get to see it, and the not so great blessing is that you have to change it, and no one can change it for you.
So, how can people find out more about you? Where can they go find or learn more about you at?
Well, I just started a YouTube channel. I would love for you to check it out. And the three things that I felt very drawn towards exploring in the YouTube channel, at least for now, are sourced around emotional resilience and spirituality and wellness. And I have just started touching a few topics on emotional resilience. I will be heading into meditation next, and after that, starting to do videos on wellness. So that's one of the best places. I also like to hang out on Instagram, and I also love to write. And the best place to find me and my writings would be on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thanks so much for appearing today. I really appreciate your time and getting to learn a little bit more about you and really diving deep into how to really fix emotions and how to really be in control and in the driver's seat of our lives.
Super duper. I love the question. Thank you so much for having me. Absolute honor, absolute privilege. And I hope the intention that we set for, our video today, which was to be of higher service to anyone struggling with anything that we discussed in this video, it lands on those very humans that were meant to hear this. So thank you so much for having me, Bryce. It was an absolute pleasure.
Excellent. That could be a cool promo. So thank you so much for those watching at home. I really appreciate you guys. If you made to this point, you're part of the, select few that can actually focus long enough to actually, make to end of a video. So if you want to get more content just like this, or if you want to start moving towards the person that you could become, maybe you want to go and help more people out, like you're a coach or a therapist, and you're trying to help more people out, but for whatever reason, it's just not working. I recommend you go join my group called Uncapped Growth Strategies so we can help you get to where you want to be today. Okay? So have a great day. Talk to you soon. See you later. And we're done in 3 and 2 and 1.